Welcome to the Hmong Women podcast. My name is Emily.
I'm Ariel.
And I'm Dochi.
And before we start today's podcast, I wanted to put out there a trigger warning because the topic that we will be talking about today is mental health, mental illness, and some thoughts of suicidal ideation. So if that is something that is a heavier topic that is harder for you to listen to, if it will trigger something, and we do ask that you take a break from today's episode. That's totally okay. It is a pretty heavy topic. And then feel free to join us for our other episodes that we'll be launching. We appreciate your time and your willingness to join us as we talk about things on our podcast. But again, if today's episode is a little too heavy, feel free to join us another time. So as stated, today we will be talking about mental health and what our experience with mental health is and has been. All right, so the first question I want to put out to the ladies here is, to you, what is the difference between mental health and mental illness?
So when I thought about this, I also wanted to do a quick Google search to make sure I was on the right track, because you never know. So to me, mental health refers to anyone's state of mental or emotional well-being, while mental illnesses are a diagnosable condition that affects a person's ability to function. So that's what it is to me and the differences.
Yeah, so mental health and mental illness, there is a big difference in that. I didn't know that there was until I went on my own little mental journey. But yes, as Ariel stated, according to SAMHSA, or the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. So it does affect how we think and feel and act. And then it also determines how we handle stress and how we socialize with others and basically make choices. And so we want to make sure that we have a healthy mental health state of mind, because good mental health functioning means that we are able to live life successfully and manage day-to-day stresses. And then a mental illness is something, a mental block that can really impact your mental health. And so think about suffering from major depression or major anxiety. So again, SAMHSA defines mental illnesses as a disorder ranging from mild to severe, and it can affect how someone feels, their emotions, their thinking, and or their behavior. And just to put a quick stat out there so that you're not crazy if you do have a mental illness, which you're not, is that nearly 1 in 5 adults do live with a mental illness currently in the United States. But also, according to the NHS, which is located in the UK, they also reported the same stat. So know that you're not the only person who may have a mental illness. So that is my definition and understanding of the difference between mental illness and mental health.
Funny thing is, I actually got the same exact quote. I pulled it from the CDC. When I was thinking about this question, I also wanted to make sure that I wasn't misunderstanding what mental health and mental illness was, because for me growing up, they were all just the same. Because, well, I'll get into that a little bit more later on, but from the CDC, what I pulled was it includes, our emotional, psychological, social well-being. It is literally the same exact quote that Emily just stated, except I did want to add that mental health is important every stage of our life, from childhood to adolescent, through our adulthood life. And it's always evolving and could change throughout a person's life cycle. And so one thing that I think is important to note and helped me better understand the differences between that is that mental health is a constant in our life, and it could be either, I guess you can deem it is either positive or negative, and is a person's state of well-being, as opposed to mental illness, where on the other hand, it affects a person's ability to function over time. So someone's mental health concern could turn into a mental illness when ongoing signs and symptoms cause frequent stress, in someone's life or in their ability to function on a daily basis. So that's what I found through my research.
Well, thank you, ladies, for sharing, which leads me to my next question, which is, How has mental health been addressed in your life, and how have you been interacting with mental health so far, and why do you think it was or has been handled that way?
Yeah, I will say for me, my mental health has never really been a priority in my life until recently. And in the past, I felt the need to ignore or either suppress my symptoms so I could focus on academics, being professional, other things in my life. So I would do this by keeping myself busy, almost like I was scared of the things holding me down and the things I couldn't face. And so I also, in a way, would tend to other people's needs and not take time to face my own. But it really wasn't until I sort of felt like I had my midlife crisis where I was like, holy shit, what is wrong with me? I was, during that time, unemployed, lost, finishing school. The pandemic hit. I was going through breakup. I literally felt like I was losing my mind because I truly was at rock bottom. And that was when I think my mental health journey started. And so I say that because I'm hoping that other people realize that your mental health is truly really important, but it didn't take me until I was at rock bottom to really realize like it really is important and it should be a priority in my life. So, and I think another real reason why I never really prioritized it is because when I looked around, my friends never really talked about it. And better yet, the people in my family never really talked about it either. And so I really do feel like I'm the first in the family to openly talk about, you know, seeing a therapist, journaling, writing and working through things mentally. And so now I do try to take a more solid approach where I consistently go to therapy and I'm also consistently checking in with myself.
For me, mental health or mental illness, the conversations around it, I don't think was ever quite brought up in my family growing up. It was never addressed. It was not even on a back burner because it was almost non-existent. I don't remember having those kind of conversations with anyone in my family. And when I did become aware that that was something in the world that I should be aware of, I think I was probably in middle school. But if it was ever brought up in conversation at that point onward, it was always in a negative tone. So I used to view mental illness as a weakness in character or in someone's character, and it could be easily fixed or altered if a person just like developed a stronger mindset. And I was wrong, 100%. Similar to Ariel, I don't think I actually focused on it until I was at rock bottom. And I think that's the saddest part is the more I research and the more I come to understand it, the more I realize that taking care of your mental health should be equivalent to taking care of your physical health. How people have standards for people to stay fit and make sure you're eating right and, you know, look like this and that just because it's very physical and you can see that and they can't see mental health and mental illnesses. It seems like it's just not a priority, and that's really sad because I believe a healthy state of mind will cause for me to have a healthy state of my body, because it's really hard for me to want to do anything physically when my mind is all out of whack. So I know that throughout college and then simple interactions with others and my own personal experiences, I slowly started learning more and more. And I learned a lot about mental health and illnesses through Emily, actually, because I was just honestly, I was ignorant to the subject. I just didn't know what it was about, and I never took the time to actually learn or research on it. One thing I wanted to add in regards to this is I did find some stats from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration that the leading cause of death in the United States is none other than suicide. And that was a stat they got from back in 2020. And so suicide accounted for more than 45,979 American lives, in which was nearly 2 times the amount of lives lost in homicide. And so mental health, why I bring this up is it's so important to focus on, but I don't feel like there's enough focus on it because it is affecting lives every single day. And that stat actually was kind of mind-blowing to me because I didn't know that until I was reading through all these articles, and I found this through, again, research, and realizing, okay, the fact that it is our own selves taking us because we are not providing the correct resources or given the right resources or space to deal with something this big.
Just like these two ladies here, I didn't realize the importance of mental health until I was at rock bottom. And I think for a lot of the collective, that might be the case, is you don't realize the help that you need until you're sitting on the ground, like wondering why you are where you are. And at the time of filming, it is September 8th. And September, I do want to make a note that September is Suicide Awareness Month. So if you have suffered from suicidal ideation, know anyone who has, is recovering from an attempt, has been affected by suicide, feel free to share. We're going to have a post that's going to go up with this episode about resources that you can use to share and spread awareness on mental health. But for me, growing up, we didn't talk about a range of emotions or feelings that someone could feel. You know, we saw it and we knew that a person was angry or sad, but we never talked about it. So big feelings and like traumatic events or high-strung emotional moments were often swept under the rug. And we were told that if we felt a certain way, to just suppress it because there are bigger, more important things to worry about. So we were always told to put other people's emotions or other situations ahead of our own needs. I know that it was that way looking back now because there wasn't any emotional room to deal with our emotions on top of all the other stresses of life. And that my parents didn't have the toolkit or foundation to be able to talk about or walk through the importance of mental health because they were also struggling with their own. So looking back now, I do wish that as children who grew up in America, that we did try harder to hold everyone accountable. But, you know, hindsight's always 20/20. I think that how our elders have addressed mental health growing up is by categorizing it as you know, we've heard and that's always how they've always explained it to me, or they blame it on like a spiritual incident, right? Like, oh, this person experienced something traumatic and scary, and so and so that's why they're acting the way they're acting, or that's why they may be depressed or anxious and whatnot. And so I'm not saying that it sometimes isn't a spiritual situation, but that we can't use that to continuously explain away not actually addressing the issues of mental health and the circumstances that put people in those situations by just blaming it on spiritual instances. All right. So how do you two think mental health in our society today is approached when it comes to a man versus a woman? And why do you think that is? So I definitely think that as a society, we can do a lot more when it comes to talking about mental health for both boys and girls starting from a young age. And I came in handy with research because that's what we do. And I was trying to not do that with previous episodes where I came in with just a whole crap ton of research because I know it can kind of get research heavy, but I don't care. I'm going to do it for this episode.
Do it.
So, so according to McLean Hospital, it's a psychiatric teaching hospital of Harvard Medicine School. And this is, I'm going to talk about mental health for women. More than 1 in 5 women in the U.S. experienced a mental health condition in 21, right? So that's 1 in 5 women in the United States in just 2021. And many health conditions such as depression, bipolar disorder, and anxiety affect more women than men, often because it affects women in many different ways compared to men that they found. And this leads to a thought that I think people have when it comes to, or especially society, when it comes to mental health for women versus men. I think when it comes to women, that we as society often label women as hysterical or overdramatic when it comes to mental health and mental illness. And then we tend to emasculate men in society or ignore their mental issues and then blame them for the results that happen because we've ignored those mental illnesses. And if we look throughout history at why we continue to categorize women as hysterical, in the 18th and 19th centuries, female hysteria was the most commonly diagnosed disorder.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. That's crazy.
Yeah. So, and that's the notion that women were just predisposed to hysteria, hysterical demeanors and acts. So the term hysteria originated in ancient Greece by Hippocrates and Plato, which refers to the womb. And so they believed, you're going to laugh at this, they believed that the woman's womb tended to wander around the female body, causing an array of physical and mental conditions, which led to hysteria.
So, like, it'd be on the top of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And, like,
and that's why
feet.
we're crazy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then also in 1880, our uterus was thought to just run around our body. And then in late 1880s, Jean-Martin Charcot found that it wasn't a physical ailment. And one of his students was Sigmund Freud. He found that it was more than that. So he started the movement of, okay, maybe women aren't just hysterical. Mm-hmm. Maybe it actually is a mental ailment, not physical ailment. Like their uterus isn't just running around their body, making them crazy. So he started that movement of like, okay, we should stop just labeling them hysterical because their uterus is running around. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until 1980, that was 40 years ago, that hysteria was finally formally removed from the psychological disorder or APA's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorder. So that's the DSM. Mm-hmm. 40 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. Here's another interesting history fact. And the reason why I'm bringing all of these history facts is because, again, I think women throughout history have just been categorized as hysterical for addressing their mental health and mental illnesses. But French physician Joseph Rollin said in 1748 that although both men and women could suffer from hysteria, women were more predisposed to this ailment due to their lazy and irritable nature. Another French physician in 1770, Francois Boissier de Sauvage, said that men are only rarely hysterical, and he thought that hysteria was partly due to sexual deprivation.
What the heck?
So he presented a case study of a nun affected by hysteria who became cured only when a well-wishing barber took it upon himself to pleasure himself with her. So he thought that by giving women sex, their hysteria would be solved.
I know we're on a very heavy topic right now, but I just feel like, would that give us valid reason to be like, men, like, that's just how women are? Like, because I feel like one of the debates we always hear is like, men do this because that's just how men are. Like, we need to have sex. Does that... Because it's always contradictory. Like, basically, I'm saying women just can't win. Mm-hmm. Like, you just cannot win.
I mean, yeah, it's true. But yeah, no, I wish we could just use that as an excuse if that's just how women are. But it doesn't get better. I just want to let you guys know that.
Oh, God. There's more?
There's more.
Oh, God.
So the common prescription
Here
for
we
men
go.
during these times of the 18th and 19th century and even early 20th century was to rest. And the worst case was bloodletting. So they like would cut you and let blood out, right? But for women, not only were they subjected to bloodletting, but they were subjected to more barbaric cures such as electroshock therapy, hysterectomy, a lobotomy, and then marriage. So again, they thought sex deprivation would cure hysteria, but they also at that time thought that male semen had healing properties.
I mean, it is good for your face, though. No, I'm serious.
It is.
Yeah, it's good for your face.
It is, but they thought it would heal hysteria.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and
No.
if we go even prior to those years, women were accused as, and we know this throughout history, being witches, practicing witchcraft
Yes.
and being vessels of evil possessed by demons to explain their hysteria. And so I just think that historically we have let these biases and these stereotypes stick through without addressing the root issue, which is that we put a lot of pressure on women to be good wives, good daughters, the perfect woman. And then we also tell them that they need to meet all these expectations, but then we never give them a day for rest. We never give them room to breathe. And then we wonder why they kind of have this switch that turns off. And then they're all of a sudden considered hysterical and crazy. So I think the proof is in the history pudding, you guys. Like, it shows throughout history that we've always miscategorized women. And even researchers were like, your uterus is just running around your body. Like, if that was the case, my uterus could leave my body if it wants. That way you don't have to have periods, but that's another thing. But if we come back to present day and we talk about, well, how are women treated present day with mental illness, we can talk about medical gaslighting, which we mentioned in a previous episode, where men and women both experience this. And I'll talk about the men in a little bit here. But Katz Institute for Women's Health spoke with 4 medical professionals, a cardiologist, gynecologist, pain specialist, and psychologist in 23 about their thoughts on why women were more often gaslit compared to men. And they found that women who went to the ER for stomach pains had to wait 33% longer than men who presented the same symptoms. And the overall opinion was just the unconscious bias played into the role of a woman being misdiagnosed or overdramatic and dismissed. So there's that for my thoughts on how society has treated women with mental illness. And I'll be done after I talk about the men. I'll pass it on. I need to get this out because, again, when I was doing this research, and these already aligned with my thoughts before, but I want to get this research out there for people, is this with men, right? I do believe that men don't often get the room to speak about mental health as they should. And I think that they should have that room. Now, that's different from saying that they deserve these podcasts. That's a whole different topic. But I do believe that men's mental health needs to be addressed. So according to the Association of American Medical Colleges, men in the United States die by suicide at a rate 4 times higher than women. But they are often diagnosed with depression and mood disorders at far, far lower rates. And data collected from Canada and the US by AAMC found that more than 60% of men who died by suicide had access to mental health care services the year prior to the attempt. But that didn't help them. And when men do seek mental health care services, it's not uncommon for them to feel like their providers are mislabeling and underestimating their needs, or that they don't have a genuine interest in their problems. The one thing that we often hear in society, again, back to my point of emasculating men, is that they need to man up and stop showing weakness, and that emotions are for some reason a weakness. They noted that men often struggle to differentiate symptoms of depression from feelings. That's your skirt. Did you hear that?
I sure did. In my brain, it went skirt.
But they often noted that they also struggle to know when to seek help for severe symptoms, which I think a lot of, as you can see, the 3 of us struggle. Just imagine how it is for men. But then men are often socialized to define their worth to their ability to provide economically, and then also their social standing. So their manhood is equal to their success, health, and wealth. And Butler Hospital cited that men are expected to be strong, stoic, and self-sufficient, which makes it hard for them to acknowledge their struggles and ask for help. And that can often lead to men externalizing emotions, which leads to the aggression and the impulsiveness and the coercive and non-compliant behavior that we often see from men who blame sometimes the women in their relationship for their mental health problems. So APA does cite that 35% of men reported they would seek help from a mental health professional, but that's small compared to 58% of women who reported that they would. So yeah, I just think that it's really unfortunate that we have those overall stats. I do also want to note that there is a specific website dedicated to women's mental health. It's called the Office of Women's Mental Health.gov. And men don't have that, sadly, but they do have their own webpage with just as many links as the Office of Women's Mental Health on USA.gov, Improving Men's Mental Health. And so those links I will include in our YouTube description and our podcast description so that individuals can access those links. But I do think that we need to do better in holding safe spaces for men, because I think that we often, both men and women, internalize and externalize misogyny. So don't show your emotions, don't be soft. But I think a soft man is sexy. That's all I'm gonna say. Like, show your sexiness, you know? That makes you more masculine in my eyes if you can show your emotions and be emotionally mature. But I also think that it would be great for women to not invade those safe spaces for men when that is created for men. Because I find that does happen as well. So my long spiel, I apologize, but I wanted to get that out there, that there's a lot of information, there's a lot of stats, and it's not, I don't think there's ever a gray area. I think it's black and white. We can do better or we can't do better. So
I really enjoyed that history lesson.
thanks. I did too. I was researching it. Yeah. Like, our uterus is running around and
Completely illogical,
we're
of course.
deprived of sex.
Wow.
That's probably why Mo was pissed off. Just kidding.
Oh, we need to get married so that semen can heal us, you know?
Yeah. You gotta be selective about the semen.
Anyway. Anyway, you don't need to get married to have that. Just saying.
I can go to sperm bank if I wanted
Yeah, if you wanted to.
Go buy it.
Yeah.
I'm here to purchase a subscription.
Yeah. But no, I really loved what you said. And most of the stuff you said I didn't really know, so that was really nice for me to learn. I did want to bring up that, yes, I do agree wholeheartedly with you that like there are a lot of toxic memes and toxic messages that we send to our boys and men. One recently just came up. In our most recent episode, Dear Among Women, Dating for Men, Are Women Asking for Too Much? When you were talking, Emily, I thought of a really specific comment, and I have it here. But someone commented, prepare yourselves. I want to share that evolutionary men have been men. They have been manly. They have been the protector, provider, leader, the one who brings food to the table, while women have been women. They have been the caretaker, nurturing, follower. It is now in America and some country that women want to become independent and need no man to complete them. I like a real man, a man who can lead, who can make a decision, who provides, who protects, and kind, humbled, loving, etc. I like being a woman. I like being the caretaker of my man, of my children. So I bring that up because I do keep a close eye on the YouTube comments because I just think they're so interesting sometimes.
Right?
But this speaks to, obviously, Emily's behalf of what she's been saying for the past couple minutes of, like, men are socially told to toughen up and that they can't show emotion. And better yet, emotions are equated to weakness, right? And so I think socially, women are more socially accepted for being more emotional and more in tuned. But I think we do need to start moving into the right direction and providing those safe spaces and open spaces for men to be more emotionally vulnerable, but also seeing that as not as a weakness. So just putting it out there that if you look at our video now, you'll see that comment, and it's a very big theme that a lot of people still carry. Yeah.
I just think it's interesting that with that concept from that person, that you think you cannot be a caretaker or you cannot be a leader who still has emotion. That's just odd to me. Like, because I saw that same comment too, and my brain just chose to go, I ain't even gonna deal with this one. Because you're right. Like, if we continuously put out this perspective, so someone I was with previously really struggled with that perspective, and we had a really hard time through some dark moments because that concept stuck with him very, very strongly. And it was hard to speak up because, like, well, I'm supposed to be the provider and all these things. Then again, I became the masculine one though. And I joke about it because just because you're choosing to be a provider, let's say that's the perspective you have in what you want to be in your relationship, just because you're a provider and head of the household does not mean that you don't get to have validations on your emotions. It doesn't mean that you can't speak up or cry. It doesn't mean that you're less of a provider because you have emotions. And so you can have both. You can still be the caretaker you want and have emotions and not be hysterical. You can still be, what did she say? Like,
What?
The
Protector, leader.
But you can still be a protector and a leader and still have emotions and still focus on your mental health. So I don't know why those have to be separated, as if the protector has to not voice what's going on in themselves. Like it just, I don't know, but sorry, I cut you off.
She want men cook with
Who
fire.
want cavemen, not men. So I think they might have some at the museum.
Well,
If you're interested in those.
well, I know I want to speak on it from like a present day, like woman's perspective too, is I was very unsatisfied in my previous relationship because my ex was very unemotionally available. And I say that in the honest words because just like Doji, we would have issues and we couldn't resolve it emotionally, where I would feel very invalidated. I would feel very unseen because they couldn't understand my emotions, you know? And so I think from a relationship and individual perspective, like, because I'm heterosexual, the men that I've dated previously have not always been emotionally available. And I feel like the men who I have dated, I've stuck around a lot longer for, because not only is that attractive, but it's also necessary for me, because that's one of the things I value. And that's also one of the things that I look for in a partner, is that you're not just going to be the provider and leader and the caretaker, but also you're going to be the one who's going to be able to emotionally hold me and emotionally take space for my emotions, and also leave space for our children. So I think just that's sort of my perspective too, of like, what if people were to come in this conversation and be like, oh, I don't need that actually, though, I've been told that all my life. Well, maybe you should take a step back and, you know, see it from the people who you're trying to date's perspective. So yeah.
Yeah, no, and not just someone that you date romantically, but I
Yeah.
think even like, I just feel like the male family figures in my life, if they were a little more emotionally available and were willing to talk about, hey, we had this miscommunication, you reacted this way, I just feel like it would resolve so many of our issues, and it would open up a safer relationship and help us maintain that relationship a lot more with these male figures in my life. And that hasn't been the case. And part of that is because, and these are the words out of their mouth, is that's over dramatic. We don't need to talk about that. That's not what's important. There's a bigger issue at hand, which is this needs to get done. No, two things can happen at once. This can be done while we communicate about why there was a miscommunication. That's not being over dramatic. It's making sure that we're on the same page and that we continue to build trust in this relationship. You as my brother, or as my father, or as my uncle. And I love that you brought that up, because that prompted that thought.
I love that you share that. I wasn't sure how much of this I wanted to share, but it is in the realm of it. So I was in a similar boat, of course. I was dating and with people who were not very emotionally available. And then when because they've, I think, never normalized being emotionally available, when they were to speak about it, it was a lot at once. So it's like, I can't even blame you, because now you feel like you do have space and I want you to talk through it, but these individuals didn't know how to navigate through those emotions because they've never done it before. And so I feel like it's starting from ground zero. Like, if I think of it as a game, I've already developed into like level 20 now, where I can like, okay, these are the tools I have and the resources, and talking about my emotions and how I'm feeling. This isn't involving what we're talking about right now. But the partners I had were like level 2. They just started the game. They don't know like what in the world is all this stuff. And it's like, I think it's really because they've never had that space before to speak on those emotions. And I had to learn like, okay, I'm not responsible for your development and your emotional health and your mental health. You have to recognize that and also take accountability in taming it and figuring out, what do I need to do to be able to handle these things, right? And it wasn't until very recently, Dochi update, if you want to live, I'm in a relationship where honestly I was really scared because of the experiences I've had before. But it's so refreshing to be with a man who is emotionally capable of handling those kind of conversations. Because
Welcome to my world.
I know,
The little voice in the back of our heads.
like our dating episode,
Finally understand Ariel.
sitting in between you and Ariel, and I'm like, Ariel sounds so healthy, but I like it over at Emily's. And
Girl, we tried.
First of all,
We tried.
offended.
that's what happened in the video. I'm just reflecting back to the early days. But yeah, no, I'm just like, it's really nice. And I can see where Ariel's coming from, just because it should not be difficult. It should not be hard to have those conversations. And when I say it should not be hard, I mean, it's because we're able to communicate like, hey, maybe we can't talk about it. Let's table it for later. Or it's not made to seem like it is a big deal. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And just as Emily said earlier, your emotional health, at least for me, my partner's emotional health and it being healthy is so much more important to me than a lot of these other factors. What you said earlier in terms of someone who is emotionally healthy is a lot sexier. Like your capability to hold yourself in that sense, I find it a lot more attractive than your physical qualities or trying to come off as like the strong, I'm a provider man, caveman kind of thing, because I just don't see that as something that I can work with in trying to build a relationship or a family. Because my thought is, if we're long term and we can't even communicate this, how do you lead a home when you think you're the leader but you're incapable of actually leading? If you put it in like hypothetically, right? Take that same logic and put it in a work setting. Your manager cannot communicate with the rest of their team. How are they supposed to manage and lead? If you are the man of this home and you came and talk to your partner who is like, you're supposed to subordinate because that's what you see in your life, is that you're the head of the household, you're the leader, but you came and talked to me about it. How are we supposed to lead a home and a healthy life and move forward? But
no, I love that. That just goes back to our dating episode with our expectations or standards, right? Mm-hmm. And we're like, yeah, obviously we have our preferences of like certain like physical attributes, but at the end of the day, your personality and your like character is what builds up your attractiveness to us. And emotional maturity, like a high emotional or was a high EQ, high emotional intelligence, there we go, is at the top of my list for me. Like, I know that I still struggle with some things, but at least I'm willing to work on it and talk about it. And if my future partner, whether man or woman, is not, like, I'm sorry, but that's it. Like, I don't have the time to sit here and teach you if you're not willing to learn it or try to figure it out. Try to initiate that learning too. So, yeah.
I did want to just bring it back from that. To the question on the approach between men and women. So a lot of the research that I found was actually right in line with what you were saying. So much so that some of the quotes I have is exactly that too. And when I read the question, on a personal level, I felt there was more space held, or there is more space held for women to have conversations surrounding mental health and illnesses as compared to men. And then with that thought, I decided, let me do a little bit more research just to see if that confirms my biases or what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking. And so some of the details, and research that stood out to me most from NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Health, is, actually a quote that, NAMI, we actually partner with them at my workplace. And I've been able to sit in on a couple of their conferences, which have been very enlightening. I love what they do there. So if you would like to tune into that, look up their website. But the quote I have here is, despite social progress and political movements to dismantle the pervasive gender biases in our culture, misogyny has had and continues to have a significant impact on the diagnosis and treatment of mental illness. The mental health system, like many institutions, was built by men in a time when women were considered the weaker sex, physically, intellectually, and emotionally. Historically, women were often dismissed or disregarded by their healthcare providers. They were deemed hysterical, as Emily mentioned earlier, and any symptoms of anxiety and depression were attributed not to the oppression or lack of agency in their own lives, but to their fragility, incapacity, and wandering wombs. As again, Emily mentioned earlier. And some of the first psychotherapists also claimed that mental illness in a child was a direct result of how they were mothered, essentially blaming women for causing mental illness. And I wanted to highlight this again, even though Emily had stated a lot of it, because for me, as I was doing this research, just continuously going back, I felt was important, because history tells me why we interact the way we do with certain subjects. And specifically in this case, I believe the views we have on the subject today as the way we do has a lot to do with the negative conditions and tones we first approached it. And that's how we approached it, is that women were hysterical. This is mental health. Mental health has to do with negative connotations. And I think because it really highlighted women from earlier days and women really took ownership of that, in my opinion, makes it so that we've created space for us to talk about that. And men are just, in my opinion here, I didn't do research on this part, just now visiting that realm that, hey, we too also have mental health, mental illness concerns that we should also probably focus on. One other detail I have noted here is actually exactly what Emily brought up, and it was the focus on the fact that men die by suicide at a rate of 4 times higher than women. That was really surprising to me off the bat, because I was like, that's interesting, and realizing the research, and you can't get that data piece if it's not a part of your data, right? And so understanding that men are committing suicide a lot more than women, however, they're diagnosed with or at a lesser rate than women, mainly because men are less comfortable seeking that help as compared to women, means that obviously women are going to be diagnosed more than men. All that really says overall is I really wish that we could create a better space so that men are more comfortable in seeking help. I can say that in my personal life, there's someone that I felt was important to me, and I knew I did not have the capabilities, the tools, the capacity to help this person in any kind of level when it came to their mental health and mental well-being. And although they also had the availability to seek professional help, it was a conversation we had a lot and was very draining for the both of us. But at the end of the day, for the time period that I knew them, they would not actually seek the help. And so I don't think that's an answer I will ever really get on that part, but I really want to highlight it because I do really truly feel that it's so important. I think that there is a lot of shame that can be felt for people who live in today's society, especially men, because that was also one of the conversations we had. Like I don't want people to know that I'm getting therapy, and I don't know how to approach that. Like you don't have to let people know what is going on in your personal life and what kind of healing you're doing. Is probably the best way that I can say that. But I do understand there's a lot of stigma towards that. The last point I have here is from the National Library of Medicine. And it was that women tend to have higher rates of internalizing disorders such as depression and anxiety, while men experience more externalizing symptoms such as violence and substance abuse. So these patterns are often attributed to gender differences and socialization. So like adhering to expectations of traditional gender roles. This was something that Emily went in a lot more detail. This is just my small snippet of it. And I wanted to bring it back up to just say, let's be more conscious of how we choose to, I think, take ownership of our roles in society. And whatever role you want for yourself does not mean you have to put that onto others, because then now you're putting people into boxes where they feel that they have to play this, and in order to play that, they have to act a certain way. And then it kind of it has a domino effect, my opinion, into mental health. And again, the story of what Ariel shared earlier, Miss Ma'am, in her comments, you can want your caveman, just go find the caveman. But don't try to publicly put out there that all men should be like a caveman. I wish I could put that in a better way, but allowing space. And what I love what you said earlier, Emily, is allowing that space for men to be able to do that and share that vulnerability, and also not take it away. because I have seen that happen in a very recent event in my personal life with a group where somebody did express that, hey, I have this, and they I just don't feel was as well received. There was a lot of ignorance around the topic. Like, they could have just this and that, but it's like, okay, well, seems like there's a lot of research that should be done first before you start speaking upon what they should and shouldn't have done. Because mental health and mental illnesses, it's not just somebody feels a certain way and that's it. There's a lot chemically going on in someone's body when it comes to that. But that's my rant on that part.
No, but I think that's a great lead in to our last question is, what steps do we think can be taken to allow people to be more comfortable about speaking up about mental health and mental illness and then addressing it, right? And I think that's a good first step, is just even talking about it and holding that space for people and learning about it. I do want to add too that just because you have a mental illness doesn't mean that gives you then leeway to treat people a certain way. And I think that a lot of people do use that as a crutch. And for a long time, I thought that I was using that as a crutch for myself, but I talked to my therapist and I was not. So I feel good about that. But I just think that a good way to even start addressing it and continuing to have those conversations to make big changes is to acknowledge that there's something going on and that there is a gap in the field of help and in society for addressing mental illness. As Dochi mentioned earlier, mental illness is not a character flaw. It's not something that you can just like turn on and off with a switch. And I think that people think, like Dochi said earlier, like a lot of people do have that mindset of like, oh, it's just your mindset. Like, you need to just be better. You need to just not think that way. You need to just like pick yourself up by the bootstraps and get up and stop feeling sad about yourself. And I think it starts with like having conversations about it, and then people change, like shifting their mindset a little bit about how they view mental illness. NAMI came out with a really great video recently, and I saw it. It was a Hmong interpreter, and she did the whole video in Hmong, specifically for our Hmong elders. And I have that linked in the upcoming post as well, for individuals who want to access that video for their parents. And I think that we should definitely reshare that on our page, that YouTube video.
Yeah.
It's a 10-minute video talking about using the correct terms for mental health and mental illness, how to find your, providers, and how to get help for that. And it's just a really great video, but that's the first step, I think, to addressing it. And in connection to our comments from earlier about our viewers want to know us on a more personal level. Here's something personal about me and I posted this on my personal Instagram page, but I've mentioned it before here on our podcast, is that I suffer from pretty major illnesses. So, and I was diagnosed with a serious mental illness. So I was diagnosed with major depression disorder, and then major anxiety, and then suicidal ideation. And so I just want to put that out there, because I know for some people that can be really hard to even like talk about and put out there. But I think that it doesn't make you less of a person. It doesn't make you less intelligent or crazy or hysterical. It doesn't make you over dramatic. I think that it's just, unfortunately, a symptom of a lot of things that are out of your control. And so you deserve to understand why you're feeling the way that you feel, and you deserve to have a strong mind, body, and emotional state. Yeah.
I love how you shared all those tangible tips. I almost take it from a different perspective of like, I always thought that mental health, or when you went to therapy, it was because you had a really bad mental illness. And so for me, like, it finally took the switch for me, because I was like, I understood that other people in my life were also going to therapy, but not for major mental illnesses too. So I do want to put it out there that like, figuring out what mental health means to you and going to therapy just for even the minor stressors in life, whether it's work, life, your relationship, I feel like that really does help. And I was on that spectrum too of like, do I even need therapy because it's such minor things? So it comes to a point where you're almost even minimizing what you're going through and thinking you don't need therapy because it's so minor comparison to others.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I was coming from. And so I looked it up real quick, but mental health can come in many forms. So obviously like your physical health. So getting enough sleep, getting enough exercise. And then also there's a relaxation, social connection, mindfulness, positivity. So practicing gratitude, finding balance, setting goals. All those things do aid into your mental health. So it truly is not just, oh, you go to a therapist and you're recovered. It's a full holistic view of your life of how you can, work through those things or different aspects of your life in total. And I think the only other thing I wanted to say here is that in order for people to become more comfortable speaking up about mental health, it's knowing when to speak to a therapist versus a friend. So that was a big pivoting point for me, is like, I think there was only so much that I could vent to my friends and talk to my friends about where I still felt stuck and I still felt like I wasn't going anywhere. And so for me, I finally reached out to a therapist because I was just tired at the place that I was at. And so I would say that as my last sort of like tip is know when you want to seek professional help, and that a friend can only provide as much support and as much validation, but can only take you so far.
I used to think that you only needed mental health, like professional help, after you went through something really deep. But then realizing that just like you do your physical routines yearly for preventative measures, I think it should be thought in the same manner, in the same way, that you should be seeking out, I think personally, therapy as a preventative measure. It's to teach you these skills so that if you do run into those problems in the future, you do know how to navigate it, instead of trying to clean up in the aftermath, trying to fix the chaos once it's already chaotic. And that's a lot for somebody to have to handle all at once. I have been listening to, actually, on my health journey, I listen to a lot of motivational videos. It's usually how I start my day, because I believe the first 10 minutes of your morning affects the rest of your day. And for me, it works. I don't care what kind of placebo, whatever, it works. So there's a specific moment in one of the motivational videos that I listen to, and this lady talks about how you think about it like a puddle and like drops of water, right? One drop of water might be insignificant, but if it continuously drops, it creates a puddle. And how much like water is dropped into this puddle, it could become an ocean. And I think of that as like maintaining yourself, your mental health in any realm of your life. You let that drop of water continuously build up, and if it becomes too much, you're going to end up drowning in this ocean. And it's harder to clean that up than as opposed to if there's a drop of water and you figure out where the problem is and you clean it up, it's easier to manage. And I always think about that when it comes to any realm of health, in terms of for myself, whether that be mental, physical, or anything. It's preventative. I prefer to prevent it than to experience it and then try to cure it or try to figure out a solution at that point. I did want to go in a little bit more here. I have some notes. So in regards on how to create more space in allowing people to be more comfortable in speaking up about mental health and mental illness and addressing it. My perspective is that, like many other topics in life, I think education is the first step in figuring that piece out and having that conversation. I think when people feel that it's foreign to them, they just don't talk about it, or they only talk about the biases that they've learned growing up. I think it's important to educate, if you're listening in and you've not done your due diligence in at least, researching the basics of what mental health is, some of the symptoms that people might go through. I suggest that. There are many myths and misconceptions out there surrounding the topic. Not only that, but there's a lot of stigma towards those who do express their experiences with it. And I think that doesn't create the space we need in order to have those conversations be had. I also believe that normalizing the conversations will bring forth the topic of accountability. So Emily brought this up earlier. And I feel that it's hard to be accountable for something if you lack the ability to see what you should be accountable for. And that's why I say start with education. Start with understanding what mental health is, and learn how you can be then accountable for your own actions. I think that, as Emily said, there are certain people out there who utilizes it as a crutch, as a I have this, and as if like that's a reason why you can be a mean person or a rude individual, or why you should have more leniency towards certain. No, you're human, I'm human. Not to say like everybody goes through it to minimize your situation, but you still are accountable for your own actions, and what you do in this world, regardless of, as harsh as it sounds, your mental well-being. You are accountable for your mental health and mental well-being, and you can't say, I have this and that's why I do that. If that's the world we live in, it's just going to continuously get more and more harsh. When I say create room and space for us to talk about it, it doesn't mean create more room and space for someone to be held unaccountable for their actions. So that's my rant on that. If you are able to share this, I can send this later. But when I was looking up like the mental health, mental illness, because I was just using them interchangeably until I was like looking it up. And so I have here like mental health is a state of well-being, and it's just like a little
infographic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I love it because they also have some notes on indicators of good mental health would be like resiliency to stress, empathy, flexibility, spirituality, optimism. And indicators of mental illness would be someone pulling away from people and usual activities, feeling numb, or like nothing matters, feeling helpless or hopeless. And I just feel like those are qualities that I would like for our viewers to maybe understand too, because I know, like, at least in my personal settings, where someone would be exhibiting these qualities or characteristics, and we would talk about it, but we didn't realize this is what it meant.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, like, as if like it's just a bad thing, like, but it's like, no, I think that's something else. But when you don't know, it's just so easy to be like, oh, so-and-so, like they just, and as if like this is, yeah. And then it makes it harder for that person to
seek help.
Yeah. So that was just an infographic that I found, and I felt would be nice to share.
Yeah. We can definitely share that on our stories.
Yeah. End of my tangent.
No, you're good. I think that overall, from the three of us, I can say that we look at mental health as a holistic approach, that you can't just, right, like imagine this as a hose and you have multiple holes that are leaking from your holes. If you plug one hole, you're still going to have a bunch of other leaks. And so it's important. So it's important for you to address all of the leaks in order to fix the problem. And I just want to end the podcast with this overall message to those of you who may be experiencing hard times, is that you are here and you are loved, you are heard and you are brave. You are not alone. It is hard, but it does not have to be hard alone. It can be hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel, because sometimes it's even hard to hold your head up to be able to look. But we're glad that you're here, and we're glad that you're trying, and we look forward to all of the amazing, even if mundane things that you will do, and you will do them. And I hope that you begin to feel the warmth of joy again and find your purpose again. And that's because we believe that that's what you deserve, is to be here and be seen. It's hard, but you've got this. And we are here to help you in the way that we can online.
Yes, this is that fine line between like friends and professional.
Boundaries.
We're not therapists.
Yes.
But thank you for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. We would love to hear your thoughts, how you help yourself or others through their mental journey, any tips that you have, or even if you just want to share an overall message of joy and give that to other people, feel free to leave that in the comments. Subscribe to us, bring our count up to 500. How about that? And follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and we will see you next time.